Now, Ben Spies Butcher is a lecturer in the economy and society in the Department of Sociology at Macquarie University. He's completed his PhD in economics at the University of Sydney, while he was still working in the non-government sector on issues such as human rights. His research focuses on the economics and politics of social and human rights. His research focuses on the economics and politics of social and environmental policy and political participation. It's a small thing. He teaches courses on economic sociology and political sociology at undergraduate and postgraduate level. He's also a research associate at the Retirement Policy and Research Centre at the University of Auckland. He's also a member of the Policy Advisory Group for the Council of the Aged in NSW, for which this topic is so relevant, and a board of Shelter, again so relevant to the actual topic.
Sorry, No, I was trying to do that and I just did it very...
I'll give you a 5-minute wind up, okay?
Please do, yeah. And I will not, hopefully I won't be wound up. I certainly shouldn't be delaying even getting up here. So, also acknowledge that we're meeting on Aboriginal land, always was and always will be. And thank you very much for inviting us along, and thanks everyone for coming along. So, what we're both going to be talking about today is a bit of our, social pact that has essentially completely broken down, as evidenced by this ridiculous situation where people are getting rung up, given large bills that they never really owed, talking to computers in order to try and solve them. But also by what is a growth in the number of people in precarious work and people who are in insecure housing, and a stigmatisation and marginalisation of a growing number of people onto a number of benefits which are grossly inadequate and now extraordinarily strongly policed. I'm going to talk about that slightly differently to Eva. So I'm going to try and start at the opposite end of that. I want to try and start at the bits of our social compact that seem to be working, not brilliantly, but not that bad, and think about how we might extend them a little bit more. So I think it's now reasonably clear that New Start, the unemployment benefit, doesn't work. It's well below the poverty line. It's essentially impossible to live a decent life in Sydney on New Start. The compliance that is around it has grown to such an extent that it's now very, very hard to access when you need it. That is, when you lose your job or become unemployed or lose another form of income, it now takes an extraordinarily long period to be able to get it working, so you actually get paid, and you're subject to a series of sanctions that mean if you make even very small errors, you then lose it for long periods of time. And as we've discovered recently, sometimes when the government makes very small errors, you also lose it for very long periods of time. So it's completely not working. But there are some bits of our welfare state which are slightly more adequate. And I want to talk a little bit about why I think they're more adequate and why I think they might be a stepping stone to thinking through this question of a minimum income or a basic income as a goal of progressive people, as a way of trying to make arguments about the changing nature of the society we want, the changing nature of work, and that opens up, I suppose, a pragmatic but still somewhat utopian pathway to be able to do more interesting things. So what are the two bits of our system that look most like a basic income? And so is everyone here already across what a basic income is? Beautiful. So I'm not going to explain it in great detail. So we have two payments that kind of look a little bit like that. We've got one which you become eligible for when you turn 65, which is the age pension. So it's not that universal. And we have another called family payments, or family benefits, which you also get access to when you have children. Now, both of these aren't universal in a strict sense. That is, they're means tested. But they're means tested in a very different way to the rest of our system. So they're only tested against income, for a start. So there's no work test, there's no other form of conditionality. There are not lots of forms that you continuously have to fill in. There are actually quite a few forms you have to initially fill in. But there's nowhere near as many forms. You know, there's just a degree of how many forms. There's quite a lot fewer forms that you have to fill in. And that test is only tested against income. It's relatively generously tested against income. That is, it's tested in a way that most of the people in the group, most of the people who are over 65, most of the people who have kids, most people qualify for at least some of the payment. Don't qualify for all, they qualify for at least some of the payment. Now that means that those two payments go to extraordinarily large groups of people. And they go to them on an identity or a basis that most politicians are pretty comfortable defending. In fact, most politicians actively seek to be associated with. People like being associated with families, particularly working ones, but not all families to some extent, and with older people. And I think that has made a real difference in the politics of these payments over the last little while. So, if you look at what's happened to New Start, or to the disability support pension, or to parenting payments, all of them have been under forms of relatively sustained attack. So we're talking at least a decade, in most cases a couple of decades now, where there have been government announcements saying we have to do something about this, that people are scrimping on the system, they go and announce inquiries, someone comes out, releases a report about the great problem that these people are and how we have to do something about it. There has not been a systemic inquiry into why family payments is going wrong. There hasn't really been a sustained attempt to try and get people off the pension. Now, there has been an attempt to raise its age, and I'll get back to that, but that's the main attack that's gone on the pension. In fact, over the last 20 years, family payments have got higher. That is, governments have decided not just to allow them through indexation, but to make explicit decisions to increase them. And they've done exactly the same thing with the pension. Under both Labor governments and Liberal governments have actually made decisions to try and increase a welfare payment. So these are kind of chalk and cheese, at completely opposite ends of the world. We've got a series of payments that are under sustained attack, and a series of payments which, you know, they're not great, but there seems to be real political support for them in a way that there just hasn't been, where disaster after disaster with New Start has happened, to the extent that virtually every right-wing economist now thinks it's too low. Still no action. The fact that almost the entire bureaucracy is now convinced that New Start is not helpful. It's not designed in a way that actually helps anything, human dignity or the economy. Still nothing happens. And we've got these other payments which seem to be going in the right direction. So what's going on? Well, first of all, they have an awful lot of political support. And they have political support precisely because they're more universal. And I think this is one of the keys to a strategy that is about universalising payments and about expanding the number of people that have access to them. We need to be able to create constituencies that are powerful, big, and willing to fight for things, because in politics, that's actually the only way you ever get access to resources. If you think that things happen rationally, you should go talk to the petroleum industry about how much tax they pay, and you'll realise that it doesn't really have much to do with that. So we need to have constituencies that can fight, that can be organised, and that can expand their claims. So these two do that. So how might we expand that? Well, I think the first thing is that there's been a concerted effort for pensions policy to try and divide that constituency. Now, one that's actually been uniquely unsuccessful. So for about the whole of the Howard government, even a little bit before that, we've had a sustained attempt to say, well, there was a group of people here who are self-funded retirees who are completely not dependent on the state, another group of people who are scrimpers and scroungers who get the age pension, and we need to do something about that. Now, we've actually been really successful as a progressive movement. We don't usually celebrate our successes in fighting both of those premises. So first of all, a large chunk of the Australian population now knows that self-funded retirees are actually funded by very generous tax concessions through the superannuation system. A campaign that's been going on for a long time and has been very successful, not only at public messaging, but also at actually getting some action through the Treasury. It happens to be a reasonably easy and useful way of raising revenue in a time when we all have budget deficits, as well as reducing some distortions in the tax system. So it has those advantages as well. So we've combated to some extent that measure, but we've also combated that measure that says that aged pensioners in some way shouldn't be deserving of what they get. To the extent that I was at a meeting of the Council on the Ageing the other day, where people were relaying the many stories of older people who, in an economically irrational way, gain access to the part pension. That is, people who would economically be better off, they'd have more money in their pocket if they just rearranged their assets so that they were completely, that they didn't get any pension, but reorganise their assets in a way that means that they do get a little bit of pension that actually costs them money. It is actually pretty unheard of in the Australian welfare system that people go out of their way to be defined as receiving the payment. Yeah? No one goes out of their way to reorganise to get less money so that they can be told to be on the dole. Like, no one does that, right? But they do that for the age pension. That's really interesting. And we have succeeded in saying that this is a right. It's got nothing to do with deserving. It is a right of people to be able to gain access to it. Now, I think there is a risk that both the age of the pension moving up and trying to move more and more people from part pension onto no pension is a way of deliberately undermining that universal constituency. And I'd like to suggest a couple of things that will help, I think, in this political battle to be able to move in the right direction. So the first, I think, is that we should do what the unions initially intended by superannuation and say that superannuation is in no way designed to offset the cost of the pension. Never been its purpose, not what it was about. It was about being able to give working people pensions that were closer to their replacement level of their wages. That was always what it was about. It was not designed to get rid of the pension. So we should universalise the pension. That is, we should give it to everyone who's over the age of 65 or 67. It's not actually that hard to do, because the cost of doing that is less by far than the cost of the tax distortions that currently exist around it. So both those around superannuation, a good report by the Australian Institute shows that if you got rid of the tax concessions around superannuation, that you would be able to fund the universalisation of the pension and lowering the age of the pension and still have money left over. But also, and perhaps more radically, by doing some tax reform in the area of housing and by getting rid of one of the main distortions that currently exists, which is that the home is outside the pensions means test. Great distortion to our housing market, causes some real problems. Lots of people say we should bring the home into the pensions means test. I think much easier, get rid of the means test altogether. That gets rid of the house out of the pensions means test, because there is no means test. It gets rid of all of the distortions that are associated with that housing market, allows people to make sensible and rational decisions, economically rational, but actually much more sensible. And then, and this, I'll end on this point, but slightly more radical potentially, I think we should substantially lower the age at which you get access to the pension. I reckon something like 55. Now, why do I reckon we should do that? So, I think that we're talking about this universal income. Well, the pension is a universal income, so let's just gradually expand it down the age range, in my view. I think it's much more realistic than actually introducing it to everyone at the same time. But I think it also has these couple of social and economic benefits. It starts to decouple work from income in a way that I think Eva will talk about a lot more. It also starts to decouple our idea of getting the pension from the act of stopping work. So at the moment we have a normative association, it's not legal, we have a normative association that says you get the pension age and you stop working, so you get the pension. We actually want lots of people to keep on working for as long as they want. We want people to be working in their 80s and 90s. Now, one of the ways to do that is to lower the age to a level where it's blatantly obvious to everyone that you're not going to stop working, and to completely disassociate the act of getting the pension from the psychological link to stopping work. And in fact, to say no, what we recognise is that as you get older, the age discrimination you face in the labour market is so profound that there are enormous barriers to leaving the job you're in. It's actually very hard to get another job. What you don't want to do is take any risks at all. You want to stick to what you've got and grimly hold on till you get to the pension age and you can go and live the life you want. Now, we want to encourage people to take risks. We want to enable people to be able to do the useful things they want to do. And one of the crucial times in our labour market where we need to do that and support that is when they become a little bit older, around their 50s and their 60s. We want to facilitate that by decoupling these notions of work and payment, by ensuring that everyone has the income that they're able to live on, and by encouraging them to be risk takers, both socially and economically, to do the various things that they see and they know are most valuable for them and their community, whether that's in paid work, in semi-paid work or unpaid work. They know their best place to be able to do that, and we need to be able to provide them with the supports to do that. Now, I know that's a little bit out there, but I think it might be the kind of thing that moves us in a realistic way towards a basic income that's genuinely adequate, and that also builds the kind of political constituency that would be willing to fight for it. Thanks.
Thank you.